So last year I did a video called 8 differences between London and Berlin. And some of you guys really liked it. So this year I'm going to do a reboot of that video. So this will be 8 more differences between London and Berlin, the 2020 reboot. It's been over a year now. So I've had a chance to really explore Berlin in more detail and spot and find and discover and explore 8 more differences between these two wonderful capital cities. And for that other video, 8 differences between London and Berlin, I'll put a link in the description box below. So after this video, why don't you go back and watch that video to see my original 8 differences between London and Berlin after about a month of being in Berlin. And also in this video, 8 more differences between London and Berlin. I'll try and include some little nuggets of information that you maybe have never heard before. So keep watching to discover what those might be. And this video is great for anyone that's interested in moving to Berlin, or indeed just visiting the city, or just fascinated by the differences between London and Berlin. So I hope you enjoy it. Los geht's, let's go. So what do I mean by space? Firstly, I don't mean that Berlin has some secret international space operation going on hidden beneath a car park somewhere in the outskirts of Berlin, or at least I don't think that's what's happening in Berlin. No, I mean space as in an unoccupied area of land. Berlin has lots of it. Because Berlin is 892 square kilometers or kilometers in size. So for context, about 8 times the size of Paris, the capital of France. And about 30% of that space is green open spaces. So this city is vast, and apart from Checkpoint Charlie and the pavements around there in a busy summer, or maybe the Ku'damm, the famous shopping boulevard in former West Berlin, where it can get a little bit busy on the sidewalk, on the pavement, there isn't really anywhere in Berlin where you're pretty much squeezed up against everyone else. Okay, this is 2020, there's a global pandemic going on, so that shouldn't be the case anywhere, hopefully. But usually in Berlin, it's not that bad. Whereas, back in London when I was there, blimey O'Reilly, it got so busy. Back in London, when I was living there, it was busy all over the shop. I used to work in Soho, just off Carnaby Street. On Carnaby Street, it was busy from AM to PM, and you don't really get that in that many places in Berlin. And when I worked in Soho in London, I used to take the Central Line tube train home from Oxford Circus station. I finished work at 6 o'clock and I'd walk to the station, not too far away, and it would usually be closed. And it wasn't closed because they were doing construction work, it was closed because there were too many people trying to go on the London Underground on the Central Line from Oxford, where is Oxford? Is that in the Cotswolds? From Oxford Circus at around 6 PM. So you go and have a pint with a friend or a couple of mates from work, which is fine and lovely, but you can't do that every single night. But in London, it can get to the point where you're like that every single day. You're going to the pub, you're having a drink, you're just waiting for the tube network to calm down a little bit. And that's a really negative way of looking at socializing. And so in Berlin, you don't really get that. That, my friend, is a dangerous circle. Dangerous circle line. Oh, and fun fact, when I was in London, slang for the circle line was the Angela Merkel, aka the Merkel line, because Merkel rhymes with circle. On that note, public transport. Now I mentioned this in my original video last year, 8 differences between London and Berlin. But now that I've been here for more than a year, I can tell you with great confidence that I've probably been on a busy train or tube about 3 times in Berlin. which is incredible because back in London, that probably happened 3 times a week where there was a cancellation for reasons that made no common sense to anyone. And then if you were lucky enough to get onto your tube or your train, you usually have like a sweaty armpit next to your face or a pointy elbow going into your side. Why were there so many people in London with pointy elbows? And why do they continuously try and elbow people out of the way? A real argy-bargy battle in the tube network, whereas in Berlin that doesn't happen. But maybe this is a new Berlin dance I've just invented, the pointy elbow shuffle. Come on, do it at home. If I was to go back to London, I would do like some of my friends do in that city, and I'd get a bike now. Whereas in Berlin, I haven't got a bike yet, but I've become quite a big fan of the e-scooters. Now, I don't know if London has e-scooters yet, but in Berlin they're everywhere. And for a while they were an annoyance. People got frustrated by them because they were left lying around the city. You can kind of park them apart from restricted zones wherever you want. But now there's an etiquette. People understand now how they work, how to park them, where they should go, and that's really cool. And one of the great things with these scooters, there are several different companies operating them. One of the ones that I use is called Lime Scooters, and they have a 24-hour pass for €9.99. So that means for those 24 hours, you can take as many 30-minute rides as you want. And if you want to take a longer ride than 30 minutes, that's cool. All you need to do is just at 29 minutes, end your ride, and then start your ride again using the same scooter. The battery life is still good. You just scan a QR code on the e-scooter. It's really easy. And those things can go pretty fast, up to about early 20 kilometers. But yeah, big fan of the e-scooters in Berlin, a great way to zoom around the city and use the bike lanes for them as well, or the roads. Yeah, so cash machines, cash points, ATM machines. For those of you who are the same age as me, you'll recall in the noughties there was a band called Hard-Fi, and they had a song called Working for the Cash Machine, or a line that was Working for the Cash Machine. And whenever I think of cash machines, I hear that lyric in my head. But the big difference here between London and Berlin when it comes to cash points is that your bank card, you can only use certain cash points. Now, when you go on your app for your bank, you can find locations in Berlin or wherever you are in the country where you can withdraw the money for free, but there's not that many. Whereas back in London, my experience was always you could use your card at pretty much every cash point machine, apart from the ones where they charge everyone a set amount. Whereas here in Berlin, if you use your card at a machine that isn't designated for that card, you could be charged something like €5, and it'll warn you before you try and withdraw the cash, we'll charge you for this transaction. And it can be quite frustrating because I've been here for over a year now and I'm still getting used to it. And what's really interesting is that everyone in Berlin must be really rich, because the lowest amount I always see when I put my card in, €450. Whereas back in London, I probably withdrew, a 20 note was probably the most I ever withdrew in one point, because you would just use your card everywhere. Whereas in Berlin here, cash is king. And here's something you maybe didn't know about cash points in Berlin. In a shopping centre called Galeries Lafayette, a smaller version of the original in France, it's a very fancy shopping centre. Think of brands like Gucci and Louis Vuitton. Well, inside that shopping centre is a very special cash point, and it's one that dispenses pieces of gold. When you go there, you place your card and you can select money or gold, and literally you can have pieces of gold come out of the ATM machine, and then you've got some gold to carry around or do whatever people do with pieces of gold. This is a strange one. It could just be me. It usually is just me. The inquisitive nature of Berliners. What on earth do I mean by that? Now, this might be because I grew up in the UK, and in the UK there is an inherent desire to be polite. It's almost sickening how polite we have to be. People will always give you the example of when you bump into someone, even if it's their fault, you will automatically say sorry. It's sort of in tune deep into the membrane. We can't help it. I'm not saying that Berliners don't say sorry if they bump into you. I'm sure that they would. They would say sorry because sorry tust it, or entschuldigen, or es tut mir leid, or whatever it is that suits the situation. But what I'm talking about in terms of inquisitive nature is this need to know what's going on. People want to know what you're up to and what you are doing. But what do I mean by that? So if you're rummaging around in your bag, you've walked down the street, you've stopped, you put your bag on a bench, you're looking for something, your keys, your wallet, your mobile, whatever it is, people will slow down and watch you, and they'll want to know what you're looking for. Now this might be completely normal for most people. For me, I still find that strange. Say you get somewhere and you look into the distance, you're looking for something or someone, you're looking. People will see you looking and they'll try and look for what you're looking for and then check on you to see if you found it yet. And again, I find that really strange. Now I'm kind of used to it, I suppose. I notice it now. Maybe I never noticed it at the start. Or just thought they're looking at me because I have curry sauce on my top, or I've done something embarrassing or silly, and it's nothing like that. It's just this this need to know, you know, what you're trying to do and where you're going with your life, and I guess it's kind of normal. But maybe this is just me. So in the comments below, let me know if you have any clue what I'm going on about, or even if you don't think this is normal, then comment that as well and say, Ben, that's a bit strange. Or even better, come to Berlin and experience it for yourself and then let me know. And at least I'll know I'm not going as mad as I thought I was when I recorded this video. Lakes, lakes, lakes. I'm not actually going to talk about the lakes. I'm going to talk about something which you maybe didn't know about, and that's the mosquitoes of Berlin. Now, I had no idea when I first came to Berlin that it had mosquitoes here. I kind of knew it had flies because I read some history books on Berlin. Berlin is a very swampy land and they built a city upon it. So Berlin does get quite a lot of flies. In comparison to London, I notice it more here. In the summertime, when the doors and windows are open, you got your fruit flies, your moths, your common flies, whatever they are, but then also their little cousin, that literally was a fly then, their little new word, little cousin, the mosquito. I think maybe because Berlin is very water rich, you know, more canals than Venice is sometimes touted as a Berlin strapline, lots of lakes here, major rivers. So there are lots of mosquitoes around and they do bite you. You might wake up the next morning and have a few bites and a mosquito has gotten into your bedroom and has had a 3-course meal. Now, I didn't think London had mosquitoes, but I did a quick search on the interwebs and found out that London does have mosquitoes. And apparently there's even a London underground mosquito. I wonder if they're just not as hungry as the Berlin mosquito. But I bet you didn't know that about Berlin, did ya? Pace. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm referring to the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984. Now, if any of you have studied A-level law in the UK, I'm sure they still do this, that date and that PACE is, again, a bit like that song earlier. It's ingrained in the membrane. And so when I see the word PACE, I immediately think Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984. But I don't mean that. I mean the pace of life in Berlin. We're a year on now, and it is slower in Berlin. London is your sprint. The last part of the 400 meters, that makes sense. That final sprint, that's London all the time. Bum, 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 bum. Berlin is the gentle warm-up jog. And I actually think that's overall better. But I'll give you some examples of what I mean by this slower pace in Berlin compared to London. Let's say you're applying for a job in London You send off your CV and cover letter, and you probably hear back from that employer or that recruiter in probably, a maximum of 72 hours, usually. In Berlin, a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, it's cool. That's completely normal. And that took me quite a while to get used to when I first came over to this city. Another example, you go to a bar. Now, most of the bars in Berlin are table service, so somebody comes to your table and you order your drinks. You order your drinks, and you're going to wait quite a while for your drinks to arrive. But it's normal, and everyone gets that, so it flows. Now, if you order the check, the receipt in a bar, that will take a very long time, because maybe they don't want you to leave, they want you to be there, have another drink. Or maybe that's just because how it always is in Berlin. You order die Rechnung and expect to wait a little while. And if you order the check, the receipt, and say, I'll pay with card, mit Karte bitte, expect to wait about a week, 2 weeks. Actually, let's go back to the lakes. I think lakes is an important one. And I don't think I mentioned this on the video last year with my original 8 differences between London and Berlin. But if you have watched both, do let me know if I've made a mistake there. But I don't think I mentioned lakes in any great detail. Actually, no, I think I did mention lakes in that video, now that I'm talking about it. But anyway, lakes. That is a huge difference between Berlin and London. Berlin is surrounded by and has loads of lakes, lots of different types, lots of different sizes. For most people, the best ones are slightly outside of town, so you might cycle there or take the S-Bahn, the overground train line, take your bike on the S-Bahn if you want to as well, and then cycle a bit further. And lots of bloggers say that you can go wild swimming in Berlin, which I don't really understand, because swimming is swimming. You can swim in a swimming pool or you can swim in a lake. It's still swimming. What's the wild part? But anyway, there are loads of lakes in Berlin, and right now in the very hot summer, they're a great place to cool down and to chill out and to relax. So Paris is always Paris, but Berlin is never Berlin. So this quote is a reference to Jack Lang, the former culture minister for France in 2001. And maybe it was already said before, but that's certainly where we think that quote comes from, and it's very, very true. Go to Paris, it feels like Paris. Swapping that for London, you go to London, it feels like London. Go to Chiswick, go to Greenwich, go to Hampstead Heath, you've got a vibe there, you've got a feeling, it feels like London. Now come over to Berlin, live here, visit it. You go somewhere in former East Berlin and then go somewhere in former West Berlin, it will feel like 2 completely different cities. And that's not just because the Berlin Wall divided the city in 2 for so many years, but also because Berlin has gone through so much history, layer upon layer upon layer of history. It feels like someone has taken a jigsaw and put the pieces together of Berlin and said, well, it's not quite what the picture showed us on the box of the jigsaw, but we've given it a good go, and this is what we've got now. And that's kind of what Berlin is today. The best description I've ever heard of Berlin is that Berlin is a rough diamond, but glinting nonetheless. And I think that's so true, because Berlin is still trying to work out what kind of city it is today. You have to remember that when you come to Berlin, it's a medieval city technically, but you won't find hardly any medieval history here in terms of still remaining. People say we've got the St. Nicholas district, the Nikolai Quarter next to the Spree River. That's where Berlin was born. And yes, that's true, that's where Berlin is born. But what you have there now is what was nicknamed when it was built as Socialist Disneyland in the 1980s, because the GDR, the German Democratic Republic, built that part of Berlin up again because they felt it was important to remember a history before imperial times and before the monarchy. So it's just almost an imaginative realization of what Berlin might have been like in medieval times. And then Berlin, of course, went through the Second World War, and that damaged so much of the city. And then you have the Cold War and the Berlin Wall that ran through the city, dividing it in 2. And then that wall came down, and suddenly you had to try and build this city again. And really, Berlin has been building this city ever since then, trying to get it back to where it believes it should be, but also remolding the story of Berlin. They're trying to create this character of the city. So I think that quote, Paris is always Paris, but Berlin is never Berlin, is so true today. But I hope you've enjoyed this video, 8 more differences between London and Berlin. And don't forget, you can go back and watch my original video, 8 differences between London and Berlin, last year in 2019. Again, the link will be in the description box below. There it is, just there. Can you see it? There it is. And if you've enjoyed this video, give it a like, comment, share it. And if you're new here, why not subscribe for more great content from Ben in Berlin? I'll see you guys very soon. All the best. Cheers.